What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a talk show set expecting a conversation and instead gets ambushed by a host who thinks he can say whatever he wants? In just 32 seconds of one comment, everything exploded. Bill Maher went from smug host to a man watching his show fall apart in real time, and Samuel L. Jackson became the hero who refused to let disrespect slide. This is the story of the night a talk show host learned that fame doesn't give you permission to disrespect a legend. The energy in the studio that night felt electric. Samuel L. Jackson walked out onto the stage with that signature confidence, that presence that makes you sit up straight in your seat. The audience erupted. This was a man who commanded respect everywhere he went, and everyone in that room knew it. Bill Maher stood up from behind his desk, that familiar smirk already plastered across his face. He shook Samuel's hand, but there was something in his expression. Something that said he thought this was going to be his show, his moment, his chance to look clever in front of millions of viewers. They sat down. The cameras rolled, and Bill started with what seemed like normal talk show banter. So Samuel, great to have you here. You've been in, 100 movies now. Samuel smiled, gracious as always. Something like that. I've been blessed to work on some incredible projects. Blessed, Bill repeated, and there was something mocking in his tone. That's one way to put it. I'd say you've been smart, strategic. You know how to pick roles that make money. The audience laughed. It seemed harmless enough, but Samuel's expression shifted just slightly. A tiny change that most people wouldn't catch, but the cameras did. I pick roles that speak to me, Samuel said, his voice calm but firm. Stories that matter. Characters with depth. Bill leaned back in his chair, that smirk growing wider. Right? Depth, like all those action. Movies where you're just shouting and shooting guns. Real Shakespeare stuff. The audience went quiet. You could feel it. That shift in the room when something stops being funny and starts being uncomfortable. Samuel didn't flinch. He just stared at Bill with those intense eyes. You got something you want to say to me, Bill? Because it sounds like you're trying to make a point. Bill put his hands up, playing innocent. No, I'm just saying, for someone who talks about artistic integrity, you sure do a lot of blockbusters. It's all about the paycheck, right? And there it was, the first real insult, disguised as a joke, wrapped up in that condescending tone that Bill used when he thought he was being clever. Samuel leaned forward. Let me tell you something about those blockbusters. Those films employ hundreds of people. They tell stories that millions of people connect with. They inspire kids who look like me to dream bigger. So yeah, I do them, and I'm proud of every single one. The audience started clapping. They could feel it too. This wasn't going the way Bill had planned, but Bill couldn't help himself. He never could. That ego, that need to be the smartest person in the room, it pushed him forward, even when he should have backed off. Okay, Bill said, waving his hand dismissively. But let's be honest here. You're not exactly known for being selective. I mean, you'll pretty much be in anything if the price is right. Snakes on a plane? Come on. Samuel's jaw tightened. The smile disappeared completely. Snakes on a Plane was fun. People loved it. Not everything has to be some pretentious art film that 12 people see. Pretentious? Bill's voice went up. I'm pretentious. That's rich coming from someone who... Who what? Samuel interrupted, his voice sharp now. Say what you're trying to say, Bill. You've been dancing around it since I sat down. The studio went dead silent. The audience wasn't laughing anymore. No. Other guests on the couch looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. Even the crew behind the cameras seemed to freeze. Bill tried to laugh it off. I'm just having a conversation here. This is what we do on the show. We joke around. No, Samuel said, and his voice carried weight. Real weight. What you do is you sit behind that desk and you think that gives you the right to talk down to people, to mock their work, to disrespect their choices. Well, I'm sitting right here, and I'm telling you, that's not going to fly with me. Bill's face went red. You could see it happening in real time. That moment when someone realizes they're not in control anymore. When the script they had in their head isn't playing out the way they wanted. Look, Samuel, if you can't handle a little ribbing, maybe you're in the wrong business. Wrong thing to say? Absolutely the wrong thing to say. Samuel stood up, not quickly, not dramatically. He just rose from his seat with this calm, controlled power that made everyone in the room hold their breath. A little ribbing? Samuel's voice was quiet now, which somehow made it more intense. You've spent the last 10 minutes trying to tear down my career, question my integrity, and disrespect my choices. And you want to call that ribbing? Bill stayed seated, but you could see the panic starting to creep in. Sit down. We're in the middle of... No. Simple. Direct. Final. I came here to have a conversation, to talk about my new project, to engage with your audience in a meaningful way. But you turned this into your own personal roast session, and I'm not interested in being your punching bag. The audience started murmuring. Some people were pulling out their phones. This was the kind of moment that would be everywhere by morning. Bill tried to regain control. He stood up too, coming around the desk. Come on, man. Don't be so sensitive. This is all in good fun. The audience is having a great time. Samuel looked at the audience. Then he looked back at Bill. Are they? Because from where I'm standing, they look pretty uncomfortable. And you know what? So am I. If you walk off this set, Bill said, and now there was an edge to his voice, a threat. That's going to look really bad for you. Samuel actually laughed at that. Not a happy laugh. A laugh that said, "Are you serious right now?" Bad for me. Bill, I've got nothing to prove to you or anyone else. My work speaks for itself. My reputation speaks for itself. What you need to understand is that I don't need this show. I came here as a courtesy, but I don't do courtesy at the expense of my dignity. Bill's face went from red to purple. You think you're too good for this show? Too good to be asked real questions? Real questions? Samuel's voice rose for the first time. You haven't asked me a single real question. You've just been trying to get sound bites, trying to make yourself look smart by making me look small. And that's not journalism. That's not interviewing. That's just ego. Someone in the audience shouted, "Tell him, Samuel." Other people started clapping. Not everyone, but enough to make it clear whose side they were on. Bill's producer was probably screaming in his earpiece, but Bill wasn't listening. He couldn't. His pride wouldn't let him. You know what your problem is? Bill pointed his finger at Samuel. You can't handle criticism. You actors, you all live in these bubbles where everyone tells you how great you are, and the second someone challenges you, you fall apart. Samuel stepped closer, not threatening, but firm. My problem, Bill, my problem right now is standing in front of me. You invited me here. You asked me to come on your show, and then you spent the whole time trying to tear me down. For what? For ratings? For your ego? To prove something to yourself? I'm trying to have an honest conversation, Bill shouted back. Then have one. Samuel matched his volume. Ask me about my process. Ask me about the roles I choose and why. Ask me about the state of the industry. Ask me real questions, like you actually care about the answers. But don't sit there and insult me and then act like I'm the problem when I don't smile and take it. The studio was chaos now. The audience was reacting loudly. Some people were cheering for Samuel. Others were just shocked. The other guests on the couch didn't know where to look. Bill tried one more time. Samuel, listen. No, you listen. Samuel cut him off. I've been doing this for decades. I've sat through hundreds of interviews. I've dealt with tough questions, challenging conversations, real debates about real issues. But what I won't do is sit here and let you treat me like I'm some kind of sellout who doesn't care about the craft. I've earned my place in this industry through hard work, talent, and dedication, and I don't need your approval or validation. Bill opened his mouth to respond, but Samuel wasn't done. You want to know why people watch your show? It's not because of you. It's because of the guests who come here and share their stories, their experiences, their perspectives. But you treat them like props, like they're just here to make you look good. Well, I'm not a prop. I'm a human being, and I deserve respect. The audience erupted in applause. Real, genuine applause. The kind that comes from people who've been waiting for someone to say what they're all thinking. Bill tried to speak over the applause. If you're so offended, then maybe you should leave. Samuel nodded slowly. You know what? I think I will. He started walking toward the exit. The cameras followed him. Bill called after him, trying to save face. Running away? Really? That's your move? Samuel stopped, turned around, walked back toward Bill, and for a second, everyone thought something physical was about to happen. But Samuel just looked at him, really looked at him, and when he spoke, his voice was steady and clear. I'm not running from anything, Bill. I'm walking away from disrespect. There's a difference, and if you can't see that, then you've got bigger problems than a guest leaving your show. Bill's mouth opened and closed like a fish. He had no response. Nothing clever. Nothing smart. He'd been completely dismantled, and everyone in that room knew it. Samuel looked at the audience. Thank you all for your support. I'm sorry you had to see this instead of the conversation we could have had, but sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. More applause, louder this time. People were standing up. Someone shouted, "We love you, Samuel." He smiled at them, that genuine smile that had charmed audiences for years. Then he looked at the other guests on the couch. Good luck with the rest of the show. They nodded, clearly relieved they weren't in the hot seat. And then Samuel L. Jackson walked off the set. Not storming off, not running, just walking with that same dignity and confidence he'd walked on with. Like a man who knew his worth and wasn't going to let anyone diminish it. The cameras stayed on Bill, and that's when you could see it. The realization hitting him. The understanding that he'd just made a massive mistake. His face went pale. He looked at his producer off camera. He looked at the audience, who were still buzzing with energy. Someone had to say something. The show couldn't just end like this. But Bill seemed frozen. Finally, one of the other guests tried to lighten the mood. Well, that was intense. Bill forced a laugh. It sounded hollow. Fake. Yeah, I guess Samuel couldn't handle the heat. But nobody laughed. Nobody clapped. The audience just stared at him, and you could feel the judgment in their silence. Bill tried to pivot. Okay, well, let's move on. We've got more show to do. But his voice cracked. His hands were shaking. The confidence was gone. He went to commercial, and in those few seconds before the cameras cut away, you could see it all over his face. The panic, the regret, the understanding that this moment was going to follow him forever. Because that's the thing about moments like this. They don't just disappear. They live online. They get shared and reshared. They become part of the story that people tell about you. And in this story, Bill Maher wasn't the clever host who asked tough questions. He was the arrogant man who disrespected a legend and paid the price. Meanwhile, Samuel L. Jackson walked out of that studio with his head held high, his dignity intact, and the respect of millions of people who watched him refuse to be disrespected. That's what happens when you mistake a platform for power. When you think the desk you sit behind gives you the right to belittle people. When you forget that respect is earned, not given, and that it can be lost in 32 seconds of thinking you're untouchable. Bill Maher learned that lesson the hard way. And Samuel L. Jackson reminded everyone watching why he's not just a movie star. He's a man of principle who knows when to walk away from toxicity, even when the cameras are rolling. The conversation that should have been never happened. Instead, we got a masterclass in standing up for yourself, in knowing your worth, in refusing to let someone else's ego diminish your light. And that studio audience, they witnessed something real. Not a scripted moment, not a planned bit, but a genuine human interaction where one man decided enough was enough. The show went on after the commercial break. Bill tried to act normal, tried to joke around with the remaining guests, but the energy was dead. The audience was distracted. Everyone was still thinking about what had just happened, because that's the power of authenticity. When someone stands up for themselves in a real way, it resonates. It matters. It cuts through all the noise and reminds us what integrity looks like. Samuel L. Jackson didn't need to stay on that stage. He didn't need to finish the interview. He didn't need to play nice for the cameras. He chose himself. He chose dignity. And in doing so, he showed everyone watching that it's okay to walk away from situations that don't serve you. That's the real story here. Not the conflict, not the drama, but the choice. The decision to say, I'm worth more than this, and actually mean it. Bill Maher built his career on being controversial, on pushing buttons, on saying things that make people uncomfortable. But there's a difference between challenging conversations and cheap shots, between real discourse and personal attacks. And on this night, he crossed that line. He forgot that the person sitting across from him wasn't just a celebrity to mock. He was a human being with feelings, with pride, with a legacy that deserved respect. And when you forget that, when you let your ego write checks your respect can't cash, eventually someone's going to call you on it. Samuel L. Jackson called him on it, in front of millions of people. And he did it with class, with strength, with a clarity that left no room for misinterpretation. That's what made this moment so powerful. It wasn't about shouting. It wasn't about making a scene. It was about a man calmly and firmly drawing a line and saying, "You will not treat me this way." Every person watching, whether they were in that studio or at home, understood that message. They felt it. Because everyone's been in a situation where they felt disrespected, where they felt small, where they wished they had the courage to stand up for themselves. Samuel did what so many people wish they could do. He stood up, he spoke truth, and he walked away. The cameras captured every second. The awkward silence, the uncomfortable shifting, the audience's reaction, the look on Bill's face when he realized what he'd done. Those images would live forever, a reminder of what happens when arrogance meets authenticity. In the world of talk shows, hosts have power. They control the conversation, the pace, the tone. But that power has limits, and those limits are defined by basic human respect. Bill found those limits. He crossed them, and he paid the price in the most public way possible. The story spread fast. Within hours, clips were everywhere. Social media exploded. People took sides, though most sided with Samuel. They saw what happened. They understood the dynamic, and they recognized truth when they saw it. This wasn't about being sensitive. This wasn't about not being able to take a joke. This was about a sustained pattern of disrespect that finally met someone who wouldn't tolerate it. Samuel L. Jackson gave everyone watching a gift that night. He showed them that standing up for yourself isn't about being confrontational. It's about being clear, about knowing your boundaries and enforcing them, about understanding that your peace of mind is worth more than any interview, any appearance, any platform. He also showed them that you can be firm without being cruel, that you can establish boundaries without losing your composure, that strength and grace can exist together. Bill Maher, on the other hand, showed everyone what happens when ego overtakes empathy, when you prioritize looking clever over being kind, when you forget that the people you're talking to are more than just content for your show. The remaining minutes of that episode limped along. Bill tried to recover, but you can't unsee what everyone had just witnessed. The magic was broken. The illusion was shattered. And in living rooms across the country, people sat back and thought about the times they'd stayed quiet when they should have spoken up. The times they'd accepted disrespect because it seemed easier than confronting it. The times they wished they had Samuel's courage. That's the legacy of this moment. Not the conflict itself, but what it represented. A reminder that self-respect isn't negotiable, that dignity matters, that you don't have to accept poor treatment just because someone has a microphone and a camera. Samuel L. Jackson walked into that studio as a guest. He left as a hero to everyone who's ever felt undervalued, dismissed, or disrespected. And Bill Maher? He learned that the desk doesn't protect you. The show doesn't shield you. And when you disrespect the wrong person, they'll remind you, calmly and clearly, exactly who you're dealing with. This was more than just a heated exchange. It was a cultural moment, a line in the sand, a declaration that respect matters, regardless of the setting, regardless of the stakes, regardless of who's watching. In 32 seconds, everything changed. Not just for that show, not just for that night, but for how people thought about standing up for themselves in public spaces. Samuel didn't plan to become a symbol. He just planned to have a conversation. But when that conversation turned disrespectful, he made a choice. And that choice resonated far beyond the walls of that studio. Because everyone understood it. Everyone felt it. Everyone recognized the moment when enough became enough. That's real power. Not the power of a platform or a position, but the power of principle. The power of knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone make you feel less than. Bill Maher sat behind his desk that night, thinking he had all the power. But Samuel L. Jackson walked off that set and proved that true power comes from within, from self-respect, from the courage to walk away when walking away is the right thing to do. And that studio audience, they witnessed something they'd remember forever. Not just another celebrity interview, but a moment of genuine human courage. A moment when someone chose themselves over convenience. When someone valued their dignity over their appearance. When someone showed everyone watching what integrity looks like in action. The show ended that night, but the conversation was just beginning. People everywhere talked about it, analyzed it, shared their own stories of standing up for themselves, used it as inspiration to set their own boundaries. Because that's what happens when you witness real courage. It inspires your own. It reminds you that you have choices, that you don't have to accept whatever is handed to you, that your voice and your dignity matter. Samuel L. Jackson gave millions of people permission that night. Permission to stand up. Permission to walk away. Permission to value themselves enough to demand respect. And Bill Maher, he gave them a lesson. A reminder of what not to do. Of how ego can blind you to your own mistakes. Of how quickly you can lose respect when you fail to give it. In the end, this story isn't really about a talk show confrontation. It's about something bigger. About the choices we make when we're tested. About the courage it takes to stand firm in our values. About the price of disrespect and the value of dignity. Two men, one stage, one moment that captured everything about respect, courage, and the power of standing up for yourself. That's the story of the night Samuel L. Jackson walked off Bill Maher's show, and in doing so, walked straight into the hearts of everyone who's ever had to choose between comfort and self-respect.